Hello, this is the third video lecture on the topic of deviance. And the previous lecture we were talking about, so the first one, I introduced the idea of deviance, its relative nature, a form of social control. The second one, I started talking about some of the theory of deviance, specifically micro-symbolic interactionism. And that's where I'm going to pick up in this lecture. I want to talk more about some of the micro theories and then move into functional theory, right, which is a macro. Okay, so the first in the first topic, or the first micro theory, I talked about differential association, which is the idea that you learn about your behaviors from those who are closest to you. Control theory says that people who have both internal and external controls are less likely to break the rules and keep, again, the common theme here is that people are influencing our behavior, which is really what social is all about. The third theory, or the third micro-symbolic interactionism theory, is known as labeling theory. And it effectively says that our behavior is influenced if we get certain labels or if we fear certain labels. So the idea is that when we sanction someone, when we label someone as delinquent or a criminal or a crook or a bad guy or or an honor student, whatever the label is, that can potentially influence their behavior. So nobody wants to be called a cheater, or nobody wants to be called a delinquent. So we act in a way to avoid that label, right? So society labels us as conformers or deviants. Now, this idea of neutralization suggests that because labels are all other than like positive labels, because these are undesirable, people may seek to neutralize those labels. So they will work to like deny them or to say, no, that label doesn't fit me. And so this is a list of some of the ways that we neutralize labels. And I put in the parentheses examples, so one of them is like we deny responsibility, or we say things like, well, nobody got hurt, or so nothing bad happened, kind of thing. We denial injury, right? We say that no one got hurt, it wasn't worth very much. Denial of victim. So let me back up and give you a real life example. Many years ago, when I started teaching, I used to use this technique where at the beginning of class, students would pick up a folder and then they would take a quiz and they would self-record their grade and turn it back in. I'd have like 200 and some odd students in the class. The first day of class, all the seats were full. So I knew when people were gone because there would be empty seats. Sometime around this part of the semester, about October, I noticed that there were lots of empty seats in the room. So it was obvious people were absent, but when they would turn their folder in, everybody always got a perfect score every time. Well, that was impossible because there were lots of people who weren't missing. It's just impossible. So obviously people are falsely recording their scores, right? Well, it became a big deal. The dean got involved, blah, blah, blah. But some of the students said expressed this denial of responsibility. They said it was my fault, that I had given them an opportunity. I had created this opportunity and they had simply taken it, right? So sort of like, well, I didn't know the rules, or that I didn't see the speed limit sign, or, it was the door was unlocked, so I just walked right in, right? It's not my fault that I broke the rules. It's somebody else's fault. Denial of injury was another one that students used, because overall, these quizzes in the whole semester, each one of these quizzes were just worth like a fraction of a point. And so students expressed like, well, you said they weren't worth very much, so I didn't think that it was a big deal. So this is sort of the idea that, if I only take just one, it really won't matter. If I only, I'm taking $5, no one's going to notice, that it's, then we talk about this idea of slippery slope, but it is just a little bit. That's denial of injury. Denial of victim doesn't really apply to my cheating incident, but I did have a roommate many years ago who was a shoplifter. And we would go into like the big retail stores together, and I didn't even know she was doing it, but we'd get out to the car and she would just pull out all these things out of her pocket. And she argued this is how she was getting revenge. She was getting back at the man, right? Walmart was huge and wealthy, and she was just trying to get even. So sometimes we break the rules because it's a way we think we're hurting somebody who's more powerful than ourselves, or denial of a victim. Condemnation of the condemners is the idea that we say, and this one doesn't necessarily work so much with cheating incident either, but that's when, say, we're accused of doing something and we say, well, it's not like you've never done it. Or if our parents get upset with us for breaking a rule or for lying, then we say, well, it's not like you never lied to me, right? When the police pulls us over for speeding and they had to speed to catch up with us, like, how can you judge me for doing the same thing that you just did, right? And the last one of the exercises that I asked you to do is to identify which of these techniques is your technique, right? The last one is the one that I always use, and that's appeal to higher loyalties. So this one was actually used in my cheating incident, that students said, well, my friend asked me to. I was just doing what my friend asked me to. Appeal to higher loyalties is the one that we use when we say, well, it's for, what I always say is, well, it's for a greater good. Like, I'll break the rules because I'm really trying to achieve something better, or it's what Jesus would do, kind of thing. When we break the rules, is appeal to higher loyalties. And again, I want to emphasize, deviance is not good or bad. It just is. But whenever we break the rules, or whenever we do something that's different, right? Because our culture, not just our culture, but because cultures in general are not, don't easily change. There is always some sort of resistance to change. And these are some of the responses, right? When we change, when we do something that's not normal and that's uncomfortable in our culture. And so how do we respond to that insistent that you're doing something different and we don't like it, right? Okay, now I want to shift gears a little bit and I want to get into functional theory. I probably won't have time in this video lecture to go through all of these functional theories, but again, back in chapter 1, when we were talking about theories, functional theory effectively says that everything serves a purpose, right? And everything serves a purpose. And as long as it uses that analogy of the human body, and as long as everyone is doing their part, things will run smoothly. Deviance would be an illustration of something changing. So what functional theory says is that the declaration of deviance and when people break the rules, this serves a social function. So the question is, what function does it serve to call someone out? Hey, you broke the rules. You are weird. You're doing something different. Well, one of the functions is when I call, let's think about in kindergarten or first grade, when the teacher said, hey, Tommy, you need to sit in the corner, right? That says to everybody else, oh, don't act like Tommy, right? It makes really clear where those boundaries are. Or when your parent or your boss or your partner, whoever says, you've just gone too far, right? There's a consequence now. This is just too much. They're effectively making very clear what those moral boundaries and saying, or when you hear, well, we have to use this as an example, because if we don't call you out or punish you, anyone's going to want to do it. It says you can push the limits, but only to this point. And after this point, no. Right. So it makes very clear where those moral boundaries are. You know how far you can push. When we talk about that with small children, if they're trying to figure out what their boundaries are. So that's number one, moral boundaries. Second one is it promotes social unity and we-ness. I love that one, we-ness. What this means is both for the rule breakers and the rule followers. When we're in that social circle, like in kindergarten, and the teacher pulls Tommy out, it says she's saying that Tommy is different, as Tommy is bad. She's making those boundaries clear. And you children in the circle, you are good. Now, when she pulls Tommy out and then she pulls Tina out too, right? 2 minutes later, she's saying Tommy and Tina, they are that group and we are this group. Don't be like Tommy and Tina. Don't be bad children. Don't be like them. You want to be like us. We're good children. So in that sense, it promotes, and I mean, think about how children react to that. They yeah, their inward turning, their social unity, their solidarity, right? We want to, and this has been interesting. Social psychologists have done some interesting research on this, is that by simply divide, like they take a random group of conference attendees and they arbitrarily separate them, like the yellow group and the green group, simply by being designated you're in one group and you're in another group. It inherently increases competition and what sociologists call ethnocentrism, like green is better than yellow, simply by dividing us. Okay. The third one, and this is why I believe in deviance, is that it promotes social change, right? When everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing, when everyone is following the social norms and the expectations, nothing ever changes. The only way things change is for one person to do something different. And so basically, if anything's ever going to be different, somebody has to break the rules. Right. And then it happens as you have this like critical mass, right? One person breaks the rules and we shame them and we call them names and we don't like them. But eventually enough people are engaging in that new rule and that becomes the norm, right? That becomes, so I know first you had that one lady at DAR who didn't wear her white gloves. Ooh, we didn't like her because she's breaking the rules. Or that one president who didn't wear a dress. Oh, she's not breaking the rules. But eventually enough ladies came without their gloves and enough ladies wore pants. And now, like if you were to wear gloves to DAR now, we'd think you were weird, right? Because the rules changed. So if we're ever going to make social change, somebody's got to break the rules. Okay. And the fourth one, when this one was kind of mentioned in a previous lecture, breaking the rules is a natural outcome of accepting social values. And what this means is kind of what I was already talking about. Sometimes the rules are inconsistent. And sometimes we can't. So for instance, our culture, and I think it's fair to say our culture values social status, it values professional success, it values accumulation of material resources, right? That's our values. So if I am perfectly socialized, right, and I embrace all that, professional success, materialism, all of these things, but I'm having a really hard time gaining those things. Like I can't, but I know that our cultural values, and I know people will only take me seriously if I have money or social status, right? But I'm not getting them by following the rules. I may break the rules because the value of social status and material wealth is the most important value. And so I may violate another cultural value of, say, not stealing or telling the truth because I'm trying to follow this value. So it's that example again of you got to have diapers and water for your baby. But the only way I get diapers and water for my baby is by breaking into that Walgreens over there. So sometimes we have to do this and it requires I break those. So it becomes a natural outcome of accepting the cultural values. And I will stop right there.